Hi, welcome to the End Seeking Podcast, episode 40, I think.
Yeah, I think we are. Gosh.
This is a little bit rough and ready because we're using our little mobile mics because we just started having a rich conversation. We thought we better capture this.
Yeah, and we missed the start of the conversation,
Yeah,
but there's enough in there
yeah,
and it goes all over. I think it's a really good conversation to put
yeah,
out. So here we are, episode 40 with
yeah.
Martin and myself. And enjoy, like, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff.
Great,
And see you again soon.
good. Okay, so further to the conversation. This is what I wrote the other day. I said, so I've been and this is just me talking it out in a non-comprehensive way, just so you know.
Yeah.
So I've been maintaining the thesis that our individual and collective problems, all of them, are the result of being alienated from our true nature. That you'll see where I go with this. So that's my general thesis. That's what I think's wrong with the world, right? And our individual experience and our collective experience. And I was writing this from the viewpoint of, as I said, thinking and talking and listening and reading people like Paul Kingsnorth, Mary Harrington, all these people who even the Jordan Peterson, people are just trying to get to the bottom of what the fuck is going on in the world, right? And all these fourth turnings and all these different, the world as we see it is individually and collectively full of problems. Right?
Yeah, it's falling apart. You could
Right.
say we're in a decline.
Yeah, you can say so that's got a political dimension, but it's got a cultural dimension, but it's also got a philosophical dimension, which is rooted in an existential dimension, right?
Yeah, I think that the loss of the God in
Right.
and not God in terms of our idea of God, our
Yeah.
religious view of God,
Right.
but in terms of, again, what you just
Yeah.
said, the connection to
So
our true nature.
I'll read it out for the purposes of capturing it. So these individual and collective problems, all of them are the result of our being alienated from our true nature. I call that consciousness, awareness. Some people might call it spirit, but
Being.
the ground of being.
Yeah.
Alienated from that. So the answer, therefore, is to reestablish our connection and identity with that true nature, right? And then I say, well, how best to do that? Meditation, self-inquiry.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is a good, the point I was making is you're not ever actually disconnected from that.
Indeed.
You're never out of
truly ontologically separate from it.
But
it's a conceptual and experiential rediscovery of that ground.
And it's a dropping away of our identity as not that.
Yes.
That reveals that ground.
So you're going from ignorance to knowledge.
Yeah, or
knowledge
you're going
with a capital
from
K,
limit to unlimit in terms of our or partial to wholeness, you could say.
But it's a return to what's already true.
It is. It's a remembrance.
Been conditioned to think. Right. So that's the general broad strokes.
You have to
thesis,
put that context into that in order to understand what's truly being spoken of in the context of, okay, that being said, these are the things we can do.
But you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
This just came out as a burst because I was reading Paul Kingsnorth and it's fascinating to read what he's writing about this stuff. And of course, he's in of a kind with a lot of other thinkers in a variety of ways. He's coming at it from an original viewpoint, arguably.
Yeah, but they're not coming at it from an awakened viewpoint or a consciousness first viewpoint necessarily.
No, he's not. Right. But yes, exactly right. No, I'm not saying no. It's just opening up another blossom of roads to go down. Let me just finish this tiny little piece.
No, keep going. It's good.
And you see where I'm going because I'm bringing this up to basically comment on this moment that we're having in our culture and society and civilization around people trying to think our way out of it.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that's wrong because it has its own fascination, right? Because quoting people like Simone Weil and whoever. Anyway, but he's saying, but here's the trouble. Okay, so how best to do that? Well, I would say, and I'm kind of reflecting on whether I need to rethink myself here. That's what this comes from. So how best to do that then, which is to say, reestablish connection, identity, embodiment of that true nature. How best to do it? Well, meditation, self-inquiry, right? In the broadest kind of way, self-examination, self-exploration, right? But those seems to be the key tools.
Yes, because in my own life, even though I'm sort of dripping in this and seemingly in every moment of every day, even when there is too much focus on the practical, too much focus on the world, let's say, when that balance is off, the attention, it's like that which you put your attention on grows. It's like the attention goes to that more and more. And the viewpoint or the remembrance of the wholeness feels less tangible.
Yeah, right.
And
yes.
so actually,
even though it's ever present,
it is ever
you
present,
can still get the attention.
Yeah, feels less visceral. It's like feels less solid. I know that's a very strange word to use.
Less fully present. Yeah. Let's say, even though it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the noise can overshadow the background sometimes, exactly. or seem to, right?
Yeah, and so then just a quick
even though background's always there.
Yeah, even though just like in my life, just a quick tweak of like spending more time in silence.
Yes, even though in a way it's still, in some ways, the
preferential
is a quieter.
Yeah,
it's never lost, but the quality of it seems to shine forth more fully when there's a softer, slower, quieter.
I think it's just a matter of balance sometimes, and going through phases of life. But like right now, I'm noticing I'm needing a bit more quiet after a very busy time. So it's like being able to recognize that these things can go out of balance, and what's the solution.
All right, but here's where I'm going with this, which is a slightly different direction to that, arguably. How best to do it: meditation, self-inquiry. Those are some of the key tools that I've used and you've used, and they've been the ground. And that seems to be, look, if you want to kind of reestablish the knowledge and experience of your true nature, you meditate, introspection, self-inquiry, right? You need to look at what's going on. Let me just finish one thing, because I really trying hard. But here's the trouble, right? Oh, and again, it's experiential, establishing the living reality of this. All right.
Non-conceptual.
Yes, exactly. It's not enough. How best to do it: meditation, self-inquiry. But the key is it has to be experiential. It's not enough to believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally true.
And
belief is useless.
And that it can get you some way of there. But this is where I see.
That's what religion. That's the problem with religion. It's all predicated on belief.
Yeah, propositional
rather than direct experience, which is why I like and that's why the mystics is more about direct experience. Within all the religions, all the traditions, there are mystics, and they are the ones that point to direct experience.
You've got to seek out the experience of the self, of God, however you want to.
And those that are encouraging you to directly commune with that experience of God or the self, whatever word you want to use there.
The ground.
That's where the real juice is. Belief alone is useless. Even if it's non-dual belief, even if it seems the cleverest, most accurate, most clear pointing, in even direct pointings, if they do not become experiential, as in they stay in the level of pointing, rootless. Then they're worse. You might as well be just, I don't know, reading out a kid's poem.
So. And actually, as an aside, this is kind of where I got to with all this theological stuff that I've been, exploring over the last few years. It's like this is not rooted. Most of it is not rooted in reality. A lot of it's rooted in the consensus of belief. There are definitely some mystic stuff fed into there, but it's not. This is, and the idea that it's guided by the spirit. Yeah, sure, whatever, make your claim, but. So many of them don't seem to. So many of these people who, even venerable, whatever's theologians, don't seem to be rooted in experiential.
Well, this ties into something I've been struggling with, and I was mentioning yesterday about stories. That we make up all sorts of stories about the nature of our experience and reality. And then those stories get divorced from reality, and then we believe the stories to be true, rather than going back to the direct experience. Now, stories are fine if they're rooted in reality, but if they're just stories that have been disconnected from what is.
Which is where postmodernism goes, right? It's got this idea that language itself creates reality. Well, yes and no, right? I mean, but it's not like it's that like true, when we're communicating deeper truths, that they are more close, they're still not the truth itself, and they can never encompass the truth, but they can point back. This is where, when something like satsang or true and good spiritual knowledge, let's say, ultimately points back to its origin. It doesn't just create abstractions upon abstractions upon abstractions, which are divorced from any underlying reality.
Because I come across that. People say that to me all the time, of my thoughts create my emotions or my reality. My thoughts, come first, and then I have people really hold that as being true. And for me, it's the very opposite way around.
I would argue that you haven't looked closely enough and
but they've
slowly
really
enough at what's actually arising and happening.
Really believe that to be true, that I've created my reality. And there's a whole sort of cohort of people, very much, and it goes along with the aphorism types of, if I just think the right
affirmation
thing, they say the right thing or think the right thing, that I'll attract that life or that experience.
Which, I mean, this is kind of interesting, though. At the start of this conversation earlier, we were talking about, what truth is there within, this like new agey occulty. There's a whole pantheon of strange and ideas, and some of them might be rooted in some sort of reality, some of them are completely divorced from it, and some of them are pure imagination. But you can't dismiss everything, because, as we say, once you accept and recognize that reality itself, as say relative reality, creation that itself, is in fact a miracle, miraculous, and a mystery, then okay, well, anything can happen then, right? You can't write anything off.
No, it's just you can't divorce. You can't. Yeah, you're looking for a particular cause rather than just seeing the whole thing as
correlating with
that.
itself. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to finish this little piece. So it's literally another couple of paragraphs. So meditation, self-inquiry, but it has to be experiential. If we're going to rediscover and reestablish our identity and embodiment of the ground of our being, which, let's say, is the alienation is the problem, the reestablishment is the solution, therefore, to that problem. Here's the trouble, though. This is where I get a bit nihilistic, and this is where, these conversations with these various thinkers kicks in. Here's the trouble, though. I just don't see it happening. I don't see the world meditating en masse. I don't see that really a viable mass movement happening in the culture anywhere. I just don't see it. Right?
This is where you and I differ, though.
I might be wrong.
Me as the eternal optimist and you as the pessimist, maybe.
Well,
because here's the thing. Okay,
skeptic of where we are. I
think is fair. However, here's a perfect example of why I'm optimistic. Maybe not in the immediate term, but the fact that even things like yoga has become so popular.
Yeah, but it's meditation, skinny fucking yoga pants.
No, I know, but you think of things like the mindfulness apps. All of those meditation apps. I think we've got a ways to go, but the fact that people are using, meditation to get to sleep, and Calm, that Calm app,
Headspace and all that.
Headspace, Insight Timer, there's all of these things.
True.
Is interesting to me, is an interesting development.
I guess even things like let's say the psychedelic sort of insights, and all that kind of thing.
The fact that people are going
turning within.
I'm really stressed.
I guess that's it. You have to. So the broad kind of way of looking at this is, as I say, what are the options? Things like meditation, self-inquiry. Yeah, maybe I'm too locked in on that. The fact is, it's turning within.
Yeah,
but then if you turn within and you only end up at your emotions, you've missed it.
Well, I agree, but the fact that there is even a discussion about mental health, and there is a discussion about why are we not happy, that's different. Like if I look back to, for instance, the silent generation and the boomer generation, maybe is where it started. But, you go much further back and that kind of thing wasn't talked about even.
Mental health as such.
Yeah. And so I agree that if you stay there, it gets very
because that's just
personal.
That's just ramping up, amplifying neurosis. It seems to me so much of so-called mental health awareness now is in fact a kind of a rumination and a neurotic rumination.
I agree, but I think it's a move in the direction that it needs to go, in that we've got to kick the bottom out of that into the transhuman experience, the transpersonal experience.
Not transhuman. There's no.
No. I immediately saw it. Transpersonal. That's why I corrected myself. Yeah.
Which transcends and includes the personal, right?
And so I believe that's still a step in the right direction. I believe that it doesn't go far enough by far, but I think it's an interesting direction of movement, personally. But then maybe that's just my.
No, so this was a really offhand thing that I just wrote down the other day. So saying I don't see a viable mass movement of meditation, for example, happening in culture anywhere. I might be wrong, but looking at it this way, I'm like, are we fucked?
Maybe.
That was the thing.
And then simply, I don't believe that though.
Yeah,
all right. There's my naive optimism. Maybe.
Let me finish the thought anyway. Simply, are we too far away from the possibility of a civilization-wide restoration of our true nature to realistically expect our lives to improve meaningfully, or even to prevent disaster?
Finished or not? No.
Well, one more thing. But what are the alternatives then? That this is what this came up in reference to actually engaging with some of the cultural and philosophical thinkers of our time and beyond, like okay, if meditation's off the table as a mass movement, for example, and self-inquiry is just too broad, just not happening, and if we are really at a dangerously critical impasse in our culture and our civilization, are we fucked? And I embed that in history as well. Maybe society civilization collapses only to give rise to a new one. That's an ugly business.
So that is an ugly business. However, you've just slipped in something there, which is the critical point: gives rise to another. Yeah. Now that is probably more alignment with my view, which is there is nothing beyond redemption.
No. Oh, no, indeed.
But it might mean a complete collapse or breakdown to get to that point. Absolutely. And I don't wish that upon ourselves or society or anyone.
But it might be the way it's going.
I see that in individuals going through the personal awakening process, that sometimes it's smooth sailing, and then there are others that require a complete collapse to happen, a crisis, an existential collapse. In order to break through into the awakened view.
So some of these issues, and now I'm talking on, you're right, but it's on both levels, individual and collective. So I'm talking about the civilization level and some of the, some of the questions in the discourse right now are we at the very brink of an inevitable civilizational collapse, right? And I know I'm not talking about the end of days kind of civilizational collapse, but the end of the Roman Empire
will continue.
The end of the Mesopotamian Empire, all these things, and you have people write, philosophers, historians, writers talk about the kind of the arc of a civilization and they inevitably fall. Are we going? Is that what's going? And what would that even look like?
What were we talking about the other day? Of that someone, I can't remember who that you listened to. Someone was saying yes, better to just get out. Like, what were we talking about? We had a conversation about this the other day.
Well, so there are themes about this. I mean, there are people like Kingsnorth is sort of talking about it. I know Rod Dreher, who's an Orthodox Christian writer who wrote things like the Benedict option, which is to say, like, if you're in his viewpoint, or the viewpoint more generally, is if you're in a declining civilization, or not even just declining, but actually kind of a totally antithetical to your values, and is going in some really a way that you find, it just...
Do you get out, or do you build something parallel?
Exactly.
That was the conversation.
Do you stay within it and just wrestle, even though you're surrounded by people who just do not share your values at all? Do you do your best, and while doing so, trying to sort of, promote, let's say, quotes, better values,
be a light better in way that way?
Or do you go, I can't do anything with this, and I'm just gonna slip out? And the Benedict option was based on this idea that the Saint Benedict and the Benedictines sort of established an order of, they were monks, but there was a whole order of being the monasteries and stuff. And that was a big deal in Europe for a long time.
Yeah. I happen to think
where you can live your own values. So you create, we've seen them in... Okay, I'll just pause.
Might be Greg.
Sorry, little pause there. Yeah, so this idea is, do you just, in this, that's this thesis anyway. But the question is, what do you do with it, with a declining society or culture or civilization? And I mean, that's a judgment in itself. We don't know, right, whether our civilization as we know it is literally collapsing in a meaningful way, or whether it's just reordering itself.
And I would argue that it's a very personal decision, let's call it, broadly speaking, as in, it depends on your constitution, it depends on your purpose. And I don't mean as your purpose that you've chosen, purpose as in a calling. There may be some that is their way, and that is what's necessary, and that they withdraw from that. And then there are those that are there to be more that warrior type, and then there are those that are there to be a light and hold a candle in that way, even amongst the darkness. There's I think there are different roles within that. I think that it's hard to give a blanket statement for that. Either in the positive or the negative sense of it, of like saying, yeah, we get out, or no, we need to stay. I do actually think that is quite a deeply personal relationship to your
to the circumstances
constitution
and the circumstances of the world as it is.
And not just the world as it is, but your community where you literally find yourself as well makes a difference.
Right on. So going off. So anyway, there was a final line to this. After, are there other ways in which we can, as a society-wide, culture-wide, because the opportunity is always there for the individual, arguably, to seek awakening and that inner thing. But we're actually talking about, this is where my head's at with this. I'm talking about civilization-wide, what's going on with us right now, because there seems to be, I've never seen it like this.
But it does start with the individual. If you have these people who are having these conversations, are having these conversations because they've opened their views to something deeper.
Indeed.
And so it does start with the individual, but I know what you're speaking of in terms of beyond that.
Yes, beyond that. And that's the question I'm asking, is that, and so the last line is, or is this just the slow developmental work of shifting paradigms and raising consciousness?
You see, that's what I would argue.
And but also,
it's the breakdown before. It's the we've spoken about this before. The first podcast we did of like, when you're in a paradigm, you don't know you're in a paradigm, but at the beginning, when you're going into a paradigm, and at the end, when you're coming out of a paradigm, you're aware it's a paradigm.
You can feel a shift,
and so it's like you feel that breakdown. It becomes more and more obvious that there's a shift going on,
and a new order has to arise in the new paradigm.
Exactly.
The new paradigm
and
so
the
provides
fact that there are people asking those kind of questions
an
interesting signpost to me.
Yeah. But you know, this big question was what can because I'm engaged in the reading and particularly Paul Kingsnorth at the moment, Against the Machine, and just the kind of questions of that milieu and the discussions that are happening at this civilizational moment are about what the hell's happening and where do we go from here, and how do we restore? Is it inevitable? How do we get to a better place? What's gone wrong? What could go right? Yeah. All of this conversation is up for grabs. All of these viewpoints are up for grabs. And so I'm saying early on, well, for me, I'm going, is my thesis sufficient? Right? That's part of the question. Is this thesis that all of our problems, civilizationally, individually, can be rooted, can be traced back to this one issue? We're lost to our true nature. We're disconnected from the wholeness and the boundless intelligence and that connected intelligence of our true nature. And by taking recourse to that level of life, Maharishi, right? It's everyone. Yeah. It's not just about the individual. Ultimately, it starts and ends there in some ways.
This is it. Because actually,
but that's the thing. But I'm looking around, going, it's not there.
Yeah. If you look at that in terms of each individual and the people in power, the people in places of influence, the people who are making decisions that impact hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people, billion, if those had a change of heart, as in a reconnection with their own
change
nature,
of heart, metanoia, it's exactly what you're saying.
It would have that input pact. And so again, it begins and ends with the individual awakening to their recognition, the recognition of their nature.
And are we and all these people falling into this trap of creeping collectivism, which is to say we have to change it all and fix the world and do all that or nothing at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, any collectivist enterprise tends to be murderous in the end, mass murderous. It just never works.
So I would say
you can't
put your air mask on yourself first, but don't ignore the world then once you've got your mask on. It's like, don't ignore your neighbor who is suffering. Go help them across the road. It's that. It's like you can't live only in the collective, nor can you live only in the individual, because the individual becomes the collective when you have that recognition of your nature. There is nothing other than the self.
Yes, I just guess and so part of this is, again, the final thought on that bit was, is this then just the long inevitable grinding work of paradigm shifting and consciousness raising throughout individuals and groups and collectives and stuff throughout time?
It's the ripples in the pond kind of vibe.
You're looking for, which is hard when you see decline, right? When you see just seemingly not even intractable, but problems that are created by people who are so they're powerful, but they're lost to their own nature that they're imposing ugly solutions on people.
Oh no, it's awful, but I can't help but also, again, maybe this is my tendency to see the best of everyone,
which I love.
It's that thing we also talked about, that the farmer's son and the horse that comes, and the son breaks his leg, falls off the horse, breaks his leg, and everyone goes, oh no, this is a terrible thing, and the farmer's like, we'll see. So even the idea that to assume that this is bad, while on an immediate relative sense, yes, also we have to hold the paradox or the possibility or the openness in our hearts to recognize, although yes, on one side this is shit for a lot of people, and there is no denying that, and there's no need to deny that, we also can't leave out a space in our hearts that leaves that possibility of we shall see.
We can't conclude forever
Not ultimately. In the micro, I always mix them up. In the micro, sure, we can say this is not good, but in the macro, that's where it becomes a little bit more muddy in terms of good and bad.
Well, there's this principle I've been sort of observing more and more and thinking through and seeing how it shows up. This idea that I've noticed that when things go bad, when something quotes bad, evil in them sort of more medievalist terms, when evil happens or when bad things happen, accidents, problems emerge, and you immediately recognize them as, shit, that's a problem. It's not to be in denial that is a problem, or bad or an evil in the broader sense. But I've been finding, strangely and invariably, that not that it's not that, but it turns into good. It turns into better. It becomes the precursor or the catalyst or the transformational precursor to something, to the good. And Augustine talked about it.
Yeah, that I was going to say, what's that quote of it's better to better to have that bad transform into good rather than not have
the bad. Yeah, Augustine said something like, God deems it that evil should turn to good rather than evil not exist, than just to have good. For some reason, let's say, or for somehow that principle of it's almost like the principle of destruction and renewal, right? Or collapse and renewal. And so looking at history in those terms, and you see it in people like Gandhi who really got this. He would his whole MO was to not just passively put up with injustice, but he would be provocative in the face of injustice by just saying, no, I'm not going to put up with this, but not non-violently, but just not put up with the violence. And
he spotlighted it.
It spotlighted it by his provocations. He didn't just
ignore it.
No, exactly.
And I think people think that
that's
what it
No,
looks
it wasn't
like.
passive
and
resistance. It was non-violent, non-cooperation.
It's not to deny that this is happening or that life is pretty dark
but
and rocky.
Yeah, the mechanism was that in provoking and then bringing and showing the injustice, because then the authority, he would refuse to pay a salt tax or whatever, and then his people would just get beaten. But he did that so publicly that the injustice, as you say, got spotlighted, and then the public would go, "My God, this is awful." And it would awaken the conscience. That was the whole point. It would awaken the conscience of the broader public. And so in the wake of that, you had this sort of freedom, so that these negatives give rise, and we see it like a natural disaster or something bad happens. And in the wake of it, more attention goes on to it and things improve on the basis of it.
However,
we
are living in a very particular time where it's very hard to discern truth. It's very hard to discern what is propaganda, as in what is being fed to us before another view. And what is actually highlighting an injustice, a disservice to humanity.
We've got some deep problems right now.
Yeah, we're living in a time where truth is something that can be bought and sold and manufactured to look a certain way. We are living in very particular times.
I think there's another book, Rod Dreher. I haven't read it. Rod Dreher came out with. It was of course, some people find him tremendously problematic because he's quite right. He's certainly a conservative and a religious one. But he wrote another book called "Live Not by Lies." I like that idea.
But it's like we're living
but we're all living by lies.
Yeah, that is really corrupted by it's perfectly okay to lie if you can get away with it, kind of thing.
Oh yes, so much so that the truth is. But there's a growing. Yeah.
But I would argue that the reason why that is because we've lost our connection to God. So it's all just about how we can get one over on our neighbor, whereas before it was like, well, God will be watching you.
You've internalized your morality, let's say, right?
Yeah.
You go,
and disconnected it from a deeper deeper sense of morality.
Yeah. Of right
and so
wrong.
Therefore it's just about what you can get away with
totally.
when no one's looking.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in some ways, one of the dividing, like, keep looking at these sort of dividing lines, and, one of them is truth and expediency, it's like, or truth and power even, but, are you aligned to truth? And that means sometimes that expediency is not what you're going to pursue. You're going to go, okay, no, I'm just going to stand on principle here. But, the ones who do follow expediency, for at least for a while, are in the ascendant, and yeah, okay. I don't know. One of the things that came up, though, was how does my thesis, let's say, and arguably yours, and just this insight that, look, we're alienated from our true nature. So much of our personal and collective problems kind of are resolved by that reconnection, rediscovery, re-embodiment of that level of life, which is boundless, infinite, eternal, and synonymous with God and godliness, and consciousness is spirit, whatever you want to call it. So that reestablishing that, and so I'm reading these writers and listening to these conversations and going, to what extent are these even aware of this thing?
That's what I was saying, yeah.
And are there, just are they do they have an inkling of and I would argue that in their ways, yeah. So, because Paul Kingsnorth, for example, has definitely gone through a journey through different philosophical and viewpoints.
He came from Buddhism at one point.
Yeah, and but
he said he was missing the the devotional aspect in Buddhism. Like, right. He was missing the. That's what he would find was missing. Was it was sort of, I can't remember his exact words, but too empty or too dry, or dry. I think that was his word, actually. But he talked about devotion and feeling like it was missing something. It was missing God, actually, and that surprised him.
He should have tried the Tibetans. They're full of deity worshippers and whatnot.
But that's what brought him over to Christianity.
Yeah, Zen. Yeah, it was going to be challenging for that kind of heart.
Yeah, he was feeling like God was missing from it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, he came around. As I understand it, he's an Orthodox Christian, and that's a couple of years ago. Kind of came around to that, and he seems to be, on a voyage. Obviously, is very early for that, and for him, although he's quite a wise man in his ways, and so I think this experiential part is missing from a lot of these commentators and thinkers. Well, I mean, who am I to argue this? But I do, and this is what I see where someone like Jordan Peterson loses me, because he's so over full of intellect, even though he's sincere, earnest, super smart, wise, but even though he's trying to think past his thinking, he sort of doesn't seem to get to the transcendent. It's something. Not at all. It's not the transcendent as a living presence,
and as the natural mystery of life. It's like the problem with the mind is it's constantly trying to box life into certainty. And actually, I find nothing but the opposite at the heart of all of this: complete and utter mystery. And so I think that you're moving sideways, not vertically. You're moving horizontally, not vertically. And so you can move infinitely horizontally, I would argue, but ultimately, it's not satisfactory.
No, I don't know.
like endless meditation, endless
meditation. So there's a whole bunch.
Conceptualizing, endless picking apart.
It's like I listen to I watch a bit of Jonathan Pajot from time to time, and he's super smart and super novel, I would argue, in his approach. Anyone who doesn't know him, he's sort of a French Canadian iconographer, and he's got YouTube. I think the symbolic world. He's definitely a friend of Peterson, and he's come out with his sort of view and theories and all that, and he's very about the symbolic nature of the world and the structure of reality and all these different things. But again, I'm like, yes, but there's no place of rest there. There's no place of I'm not sure which. It could have been, what was the great saint Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas? Anyway, one of these, I can't remember exactly who. The idea that we're designed. So this is from a Christian theological, and I say theological because it's God rather than. I mean, I'm more versed in the language of self, right? And Brahman rather than the sort of Christian notions of God the Father and all that. But it holds the idea that we're made in, let's say, the image of that, the ultimate. And we're only going to find our rest, only going to find our peace, and only going to find our foundations in the living experience of God. Okay. Anything short of that's not going to satisfy us. So like the secular or the profane or the world of the senses and the appetites and all this kind of stuff, entertaining ourselves to death, it's just not going to work. It's not going to satisfy us. That's being endlessly lost in the woods of the senses.
It's exhausting, actually.
It's exhausting.
It exhausts resources of the body, of the mind, rather than fills one up.
And that's seeking, right? I mean, you're kind of looking out to get that, more of this, more of that. It's not going to satisfy. No. Partly because, or in great part, because we're designed to rest in our true nature. I would say true nature is the nature of the divine,
which is why it feels like coming home. You have those languages of feels like coming home, of resting, of reposing, of I've been using this word exhale a lot, like feeling like it's that exhale. And like we can all feel what it feels like in the body to just take a big, deep breath.
The joy of the sigh. It's a sigh.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just this sense of just for a moment, there's a stop.
Yeah.
There's a rest. There's a stillness. There's a quiet.
And so and this is why I'm thinking, why am I interested in this level of dialogue or discourse? Why am I bothering with it at all? And it's okay to, because I'm established in that, quotes that. I'm established in my own nature, and then that's my experience, and that is about being home. And so at home, I can engage in these things, right? I can read the books, I can engage in the discourse without fear of losing myself in the thicket of it all.
Yeah. Well, one could argue that actually,
But it's interesting, and I'm getting to play in it.
Yeah, one could argue that there's sort of and that's what I was writing earlier, like if you focused only on the transcendent and only into that place of rest and denial of the activity, denial of the world, that it's not a complete viewpoint. There's a subtle separation there of this being different than that kind of thing. But actually, when established truly as the self, it becomes all the self. And so it's established as that. These conversations are part of the self playing too. But it's only when there's an establishment of the self that is the play is still restful in the self.
Yes, exactly. And I love that quote you pulled from the Upanishads earlier. Well, it was an introduction to the Upanishads. I thought it was. Do you want to dig this there?
It's here as well.
But about this idea, probably a little bit of a sideways thing here, but the idea that I'm not going to quote that, but that I would argue the false idea that the world is just a dream or just an illusion.
Yeah, so Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, for one who is experiencing unity, the world is Brahman, not an illusion. The world is a mirage only insofar as it is experienced as different from oneself.
Right. So
I've changed the tense.
So the dismissal of the world as an illusion on one hand, or the on the other hand, let's say the more materialist view is, oh, this is the world. We have to deal with it and be in it, and you know everything. There's something, you know, that speaks to no. This is Brahman. This is the divine as it's showing up.
Yeah,
it's not to be dismissed. But at the same time, it is the changing aspect of exactly. The divine or Brahman. It's the and this is the rest, and it kind of reflects my human design. Actually, the 2-4, which is the hermit or the outer, the sort of the engaged, the opportunist or whatever. So there's these two, and we share a similar kind of nature of wanting to deeply withdraw. Big part of my nature, and the other one is to engage out there. And there's always going to be a tension between those two aspects.
There is. And they are two aspects that need their own honoring, let's say. It's not one is more important than the other, or one is better than the other, one is more essential than the other. It's the recognition that these are two flowerings of the same divine.
And so there's, and it comes back. I love that we talk of this a lot. It keeps coming up. The Serenity Prayer. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept those things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, you know, often life comes down to discerning whether something needs to be engaged with and changed under your own will, or attempted to under your own will and power and whatever, or no, I have no hand in this. I have to accept it, and it's like what you have to discern what's being given to you here, whatever's showing up in your life. Do I have to? And I would argue a lot. There's a craziness out there in the world that everyone feels that they have to change everything that's put in front of them. And actually, some degree of discernment would help them go, no, there's not on that level.
Well, I would argue that's because we're living currently in a society that values doing, not being, and where there is a more balance of those two, like the inward breath and the outer breath, let's say. So the more sort of activity value of life versus the silent sort of restful value of life, where there is a sort of an out of balance nature between these two. And I think right now we're seriously out of balance because we value activity. What do you do? That is your sense of identity and purpose in life is based on what you do, what you achieve, how you succeed in life is based on that, not the deeper balance of being. And I would argue that as humans, we are built for activity. Like we just are. We're physically, we're built to move. We're built to think. We're built to create. Produce, But if that isn't sort of rooted in a deeper, restful nature of our worthiness is inherent, of we are being itself, then we get lost in the doing and striving for this sense of I'm incomplete unless I'm doing. And actually that's really untrue.
And of course there's the counterpoint to that is let's say we particularly see it in sort of non-dual spirituality or that kind of, which is to say that there can be a sort of pathological, just pure, let's say a pathological version of acceptance. Which doesn't discern when activities actually engagement and activity is required, and it just sits in a kind of a passivity. It's not even because acceptance isn't just about we talk about surrender and acceptance. Not just about accepting the world; it's accepting your own part in reality, accepting what arises, accepting what is as it's coming. It doesn't preclude action.
Well, because what is what is can be action. So an arising idea of I need to run a marathon. That's what is
inspired activity. But it comes from it comes from the place of non-doing.
And inspired, a movement, a calling, a sense of energy moving towards something rather than a place of I should.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? This discernment and the discernment is that allows the mind to rest and the discerning and allowing the mind to allowing what is to happen and what isn't to not happen. It's just a bit like that.
Which you could argue is the way of things anyway. It's just our relationship to that is what creates suffering. As in, the roller coaster is still doing its roller coasteriness.
Yeah.
And we've either got our hands tightly on the bar going, get me off of this, or up in the air going, woohoo, this is great.
Yeah, and so there's this aspect in light of this little sort of thought that I had thinking about this stuff. It returns me intellectually, conceptually, as well as experientially back to the witness. You go, actually, there's this place of recognition and understanding, and you can frame it however you want, but it's something like, this is all meant to happen. Mm-hmm. This is all of it is spontaneously arising, and my responses to it, the world itself, all the interactions. Yeah. This is now. There's a big push around free will, and frankly, I'm a determinist. Let's say it's a horrible word, but I don't see any free will, even though sometimes I might participate in what appears to be it.
Yeah, I was going to say I see the appearance of free will.
Yeah,
but I don't equate that to actual free will.
And so there's deeper,
in the same way there's the appearances of persons and worlds and actions and doings and all the rest of it.
And I see it particularly in the sort of theological world that there's this mystery that they seem to kind of carry around, free will and the determinism of God or whatever. But again, it's like there's a deep part of us that is witnessing this. The deepest part of us is the sort of transcendent, looking through the eyes of the immanent, and also participating through the immanent.
Well, yeah, we are that too. It's there's no separation there. It's both, and so this is why I find it helpful to talk in dimensions, to talk in terms of
right.
There are relative dimensions. There are truths that stand in their own dimension that are transcended and yet included.
Yeah.
Which gets us back to the conversation of spiral dynamics earlier.
Yeah, right. So, there's this progressive development of on a personal level and on a societal level that's occurring.
Yeah.
But what I guess part of this is we're in this now. We're in the thrall of this disturbed world. Is it more than it ever has been? You can make the case in many ways it's not. You can make the case in many ways it's less violent, and some make that case less violent than it's ever been, even though we know about it more.
Yeah, I would say we've got different things that are tricky right now that are maybe new things to contend with that we haven't ever had to. Things like internet, things like truth, things like like there's, I think
agendas have become very a narrative has become
maybe just a different set of trials, different set of things that are difficult for us.
It's funny, there's a word in Greek which we know quite well, apocalypse, and it's pretty much been taken in generally to mean the end of the world, the apocalypse, but really it means uncovering, right? It means to reveal, to uncover. René Girard talked a lot about the apocalypse as this progressive uncovering, and it's already happening. And in many ways, the internet is the great representative of the apocalypse. It is the uncovering of all things hidden. And that's what the powers are struggling with, that you can't fucking hide anything anymore. That's why censorship has become so prevalent.
Well, you say that, but I would say that there's also
there's bullshit that comes out.
Awful lot of hiding, you know, in terms of distorting of truth and things like
totally.
that. It's both. I would say internet has basically unveiled both of those.
Yeah, but before the internet, there was no mechanisms by which the truth could even begin to get out,
but also all the lies could begin to get out.
I'm not saying that isn't part of it also, but within that, I mean, before it was just nothing but the agenda, the lie, the narratives driven by, you know, institutions and powers. Now, that's why we see such a backlash against so-called things like misinformation and disinformation. Often it's just used as a pejorative to a real truth. And I'm not saying that everything that comes out on the internet is truth, but there is right. But there is.
I'm glad you call it. I'm glad.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. There's absolute nonsense in there, but but the ability to actually speak truth is there where it wasn't before.
Although it's interesting.
Who can hide? What politician can hide from their wrongdoings, for example?
But it's interesting, this word of truth has become a very relative, my truth and your truth, you know, thing as well. And
I'm not playing that game.
No, I know. I'm saying that's not.
But really, that is the game that's played. Yeah,
it's not really about truth that we're talking about, which is demonstrably, experientially known. When you strip away all narratives, what you're left with is truth.
Well, what's the facts of the matter? Yes, beyond
rather than my feelings. My truth is my feelings.
Well, you know,
which feelings are also
there's epistemological categories are being mauled in this. When you say, you know, because you go, I'm feeling this, therefore it's an objective reality. No, your feeling is a reality, absolutely, but whether that changes the nature of an objective reality, but then that's the nature we're in, right? People aren't even accepting objective realities as factual, let's say.
So I think we then have to come back to this dimensions thing.
Don't even want to get into that particularly.
But then we have to come back to the dimensions thing. It's like, you know, being able to clarify and what dimension you're speaking of is helpful.
But here's the thing: we're in the domain of the work, the spiritual work that we're talking about is about discovering the truth of our own nature, right? And in discovering the truth of our own nature, existentially, experientially, right? Mm-hmm. Not conceptually, that comes downstream of it.
Yeah.
But understanding and recognizing our true nature, truth, let's say.
Yeah.
Which can be vouched for in your own experience directly.
In fact, you could argue
and also
it's the only thing.
But also what's not true, that's the other part of
it. You know, you could argue it's that which you cannot not be. It's that when you come down to it, you know, you chopped away all the
well, that's, I was going to say, the biggest piece about getting to truth is eliminating what's not true.
Yeah, well, that's the netting.
You know, you're usually chopping away at the falsehoods, and that you can vouch for. Oh, now that I look at this, I see that it's not true.
Well, and
I'm not talking about a top down.
Interestingly, you can come on the surface level of something, it looks like it's true, and the deeper you get into it, it falls apart. For instance, what were we talking about earlier? Like that you feel like you're a person, and then when you look closer, it just all falls apart, and there is no person. So on the surface, when you're looking at it on the surface level, you go, "Oh, I'm Imogen. Of course, I'm you know
a person."
Yeah, but actually, you go into it, and the further you go into that, it does dissolve. You know, okay, so am I my body? What is the body? Am I my thought? You know, all of these things. But there is at the heart of it a ground that is found, and that ground is not a solid ground in terms of a material sense.
No,
but it is very solid in terms of what is reliably and demonstrably, experientially
real and true, present,
beyond all conceptions, beyond beliefs, beyond ideas, beyond descriptions, beyond notions of who and what I am. Even there's just this sense, this knowingness of being, of existence, of here-ness,
awareness of awareness.
And that is undeniably so. And I would say those that say it's not,
so,
that's the right word.
Both.
Those that say it's not, I would argue, just haven't gone deep enough.
No, I agree. Haven't looked.
Yeah. They've
most people live on
somewhere.
Assumptions, and those presumptions and assumptions, and let's say conventions of, because let's say personhood is a convention. It's a useful convention.
It's a conglomerate of
a cup
descriptions of experience that we put together and say, this is me.
Particularized.
Yeah.
But actually, when you go into them, they fall apart. They do fall apart under scrutiny. Yeah. And that's the essence of this, let's say, the spiritual, broadly speaking, non-dual self-inquiry. It's the discovery that you can, when you've dispensed experientially with the contingent, you end up with the eternal. You find what is unchanging and unchangingly true and real in your experience.
However, this brings me back to what I read that I was writing this morning, that if you stay there in denial of the changeable, there is a,
indeed.
So you've gone into that transcendent reality of what is unchangeable. Yeah. You then have to do the work of including, that's the unity view that then comes in and going, this is all, the shimmering of reality is made of that.
Yes, indeed.
And that's the bit that I see a lot of people don't get to that point. Well, they get to the initial awakening point, but they don't
the
get
denial,
to
the not self, and the not this, not that, the netty, but they don't. Well, what did Adya call it? Getting lost in the infinite.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, there's each tradition.
There's different ways,
words,
but that's so there's that awakening point. But I think what's his name? Atmananda Krishna Menon talked about it in one of his discourses, books, whatever, that it's through this process of discovering what you're not, like the netty of it, that once you discover and establish yourself in past that, you actually become everything. By finding you're not anything, you become everything.
Exactly.
And it's that process. So
but you can't skip that. You can't. I would say, like, you, without reducing down what you think you are to that ground of truth, otherwise you get lost in the forms.
Yes, exactly. And that's back to the original thesis I was making, that only when we discover our boundlessness, our limitless and formless nature, can we live in live at home and be rooted and engage in all these ideas and all these thoughts and all these lived experiences. They're all fine. And we don't need to and we don't need to suffer them in that regard. Although that can happen too, but even that suffering then, so-called, is sort of included. It's
even that is a relative sense of suffering, in terms of it's temporary. It comes and it goes. It's not you. It doesn't torch your essential nature.
So anyway, we're in an interesting time in our civilization, our global civilization. There's all sorts of crazy things going on. That our sense of the reliability of our institutional understandings is all being
offended, questioned.
Uncovered even, right?
I happen to think it's a good thing. It's just a pretty funky and messy and difficult to go through that. But then that is the awakening process. On a personal level, it's devastating. And so when you look at it on a collective level, it's devastating too. It doesn't mean it's not the right thing. It just means we're going through change, and what happens, change at the point of change is the most violent expression. When water goes to steam, that's where it's the most. And
so much of it is down to not entirely, but so much of it is down to identities. Who we are in the world. What am I identifying? You see this sort of tension that happens, in sort of nations, that there's this one pull towards a more globalist viewpoint, which is hostile to the nation, Whereas you have these people rooted in a time and a place. Simone Weil talks about this so beautifully, about the need for rootedness in place and in history, a sense of belonging. You know, that's a kind of that's a localist or even a nationalist view, right? It's a sense of identity as a people. And, you know, even though in the work that we're sort of interested and involved in is sort of getting beyond all identities, we do see that these identities, when held correctly, serve purposes of sense of belonging. And not everyone's ready for total non-dual transpersonal awakening. It's just not everyone's cup of tea right now.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
So to say, hey, I'm Welsh or something, isn't an offense to my broader sense that I'm a human being, that I'm a globe.
It's the paradox of being able to hold those both
holding these contingent identities lightly. Yeah. So
not as the ground of who and what you are,
no,
but as an expression of who and what you are.
I mean, I can hold these things very, you know, meaningfully, but not absolutely and not lightly. And I wouldn't. People.
If only people had that perspective, though, because then they wouldn't feel that it's a choice between one or the other.
It's a paradigm battle, right? It's a paradigm battle between, let's say, modern and postmodern at the moment. I would say, if Kel might make that case, that the postmodern is very much about complete breaking down of you know, this, and adopt no grand theories, no apps, no universals. It's a reaction in some ways against modernism, which is about universals.
Which is why the next tier of that is far more interesting.
Well, it transcends the paradigms. Yeah,
there's where it goes and says, well, there is a deeper view, and there are relative views within that
the paradigms themselves are contingent. But while you're still battling between traditional, modern, if you're either a traditional or modern or postmodern, you just see your paradigm as the be all and end all. You're blind to that second tier view, which can see them all as contingent and functional and useful.
Well, this is it. I think that's, you know, to sort of go back to what you're talking about of, should I be looking at it in this way, and you know, in terms of these kind of thinkers, and you know, it's contingent, but it's useful. It's useful to look at, you know, what's going on in society. If there's a sort of a losing sleep over it, in terms of your sense of your unending nature, it can get pretty exhausting and pretty dark quite quickly.
And to the credit of someone like Kingsnorth, I mean, this came up because I'm reading this book right now, and even to the Jordan Petersons of the world, really, to whatever degree they've kind of come to some conclusion or some sense that we have to orient to the transcendent, that there's a beyondness. So there's, whether they're experiencing it or whether they're just concluding it or they're trying to approach it, that in order to get to where you're after, so that transformation can be effective and wise and natural, it's somehow outside of it. It's beyond it. Yeah. Now, if you posit that transcendent over there, outside of it, and this is why I have such trouble with the name word God.
Yeah, because
it posits it up there, out there, whatever, rather than like an inner a priorness of our own rooted divine nature,
a godliness, and again, godliness.
It's tricky.
Sounds like it's a set of behaviors.
So that's why we're in the realm of the mystics again. That's where you're going to find this, because the self and the divine, all of that is found in the one ground.
Yeah. Beyond all conceptions of itself.
Which is giving rise also to this aspect of its own and our own nature.
And so here's the piece of the bridge, the piece of the puzzle that is missed, and also the most essential piece of the puzzle. I am that.
I am that. Exactly. And always point by that. Thou art that. Mm-hmm. I am that. Thou art that. All this is that.
Yeah. And that's the bit that certainly traditional Christianity, or not just Christianity. I don't want to rule out any other.
No, largely.
I know, but it's in other places as well. Certainly the Abrahamic religions.
Yes, there's a fundamental dualism.
Except for when you encounter mystics. And as you and I have talked about a million times over, the mystics can use whatever use of anything, whatever paradigm is needed to be.
Because the mystic view transcends the path.
Yeah.
But it can use it, and it can use the scriptures, it can use the viewpoint, the language. Exactly. Okay, there it was. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.